Hello and welcome back to Kaylee Daily. Today's question is, how can I nourish myself in the postpartum time from an Ayurvedic perspective? So we are going to be joined by a special guest, so stay tuned and hear all of her wisdom.
This is Kaylee Daily, the bi-weekly podcast about all things doula tips and tits, where we answer one question about pregnancy, labor, postpartum, or lactation in order to have your journey in this parenting world be just a little bit more informed and filled with consent.
Push the button. Hello and welcome back to Kaylee Daily. I am Kaylee Harad, your host, and I am joined today by a lovely guest. Again, I told you guys a few weeks ago we'll have more guests on, and I'm super excited for this guest. Her name is Olga, and she's going to be talking to us about postpartum nutrition and all kinds of lovely things. Olga, if you could share a little bit about yourself and your background and what do you do, that would be awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Olga, and I am an Ayurvedic postpartum planning caregiver and educator. And that really came about because of my own experience during postpartum, which wasn't the greatest. And I did suffer from quite a lot of anxiety, and it took me quite a while to figure out what was really happening. And then it led to kind of like ill health, which then I had to figure out, like, how do I overcome this? Which is then what led me down the road to Ayurveda, and how phenomenal this medicinal system is for the postpartum period. That's a little bit about me.
Yeah. Well, and the postpartum period is such a critical time for like the rest of our lives of health, once
Absolutely.
you have a baby. I kind of feel like we're always postpartum once we've had a kid, like our bodies have shifted. And so, yeah, but that's another soapbox for another day. I would love for you to start, before we dive into our official podcast question, to start with describing to us what Ayurvedic, I'm going to say that wrong every time. It's like a tongue twister for me. Even means, like, what is that system of medicine?
Yeah. So Ayurveda is actually the oldest medicinal system in the world, and it originates from India, ancient India. And for those of you who know yoga, I'm sure many of you do, Ayurveda is actually the sister science of yoga. So they're sisters. So it's based on the same kind of philosophy. And I think what's important to mention that the difference between Western medicine and Ayurveda is that Ayurveda looks at the person as a holistic system. And it doesn't just focus on the physical body of the individual, but the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body, and spiritual body, and considers that as the holistic system. And so it doesn't kind of just look at something in isolation. It's the whole system. And another really key, I think, important factor to tell your audience is that Ayurveda is based on that philosophy that the law of nature is present in every living and non-living entity out there. So from your plant life, your minerals, your animals, to human beings, we all consist of the same natural elements. And as a result, because we have, and those 5 elements are actually earth, fire, water, air, and ether, and everything's made up of that. So if one of those elements are out of balance within us, we can go to food because they consist of the same 5 elements, and using the appropriate foods, we can heal our bodies. So kind of that's just the simplistic premise of what Ayurveda is.
Right. Yeah. The overview. That's awesome. I love that. I do have tons of clients and friends and family members who are either yoga teachers or yoga practitioners, so it does go hand in hand with that. And I think yoga is so much more well known in the Western culture than the sister science of Ayurveda. I'm really going to say it wrong every
Ayurveda.
time. Ayurveda. I know. I even looked it up before we were meeting because I was like, I'm going to keep saying it wrong. I know I will. So anyway, so our official podcast episode question is, how can I nourish myself in the postpartum time from this perspective? So that's what I would love for you to dive into. And I know it does differ a bit, right? Person to person, postpartum time is different. But as a general idea, what does it look like to nourish yourself in postpartum?
Yeah. And I just want to jump back quickly to help your viewers understand why, according to Ayurveda, it's so crucial to for your body to have the right nutrients.
Yeah.
First of all, it's because immediately after birth, the new mother's digestive system is completely out of whack. It's really functioning at a very low level, right? So not all nutritious food is going to be helpful to you, right? Because some food is harder to digest than others. And then the second reason why nutrition is so important is because we need to replenish energy that has been lost throughout the process of forming the baby for 9 months and growing the baby, and then of course the birth process, right? And thirdly, it's to be able to produce nutritious and wholesome breast milk, right? And then fourth, and very importantly, it's so that we can rebuild the tissues, right? There's been quite a lot of, I wouldn't say damage, but there's a lot of stuff that's been going on in the mom's body, and those tissues need to be rebuilt, and she needs to recover and get her health back. So those are the 4 reasons why it's so important.
Yeah.
So yeah, do you have any questions based on what I just told you?
No. Keep going. You're doing great.
Yeah. So and just what is kind of let's just quickly go back to kind of like let me see how I can address the particular question that you have, because I don't want to go on this thing.
Yeah. So the question is from this like Ayurveda, I'm gonna keep trying to say it and saying it wrong, and you can laugh at me. And this perspective, what does it look like to nourish yourself? One of the things you already mentioned is the digestive system, which I talk to clients about all the time, because I'm like, you need well cooked, like easy to digest food, because your body has just been through so much, starting from the fact that your entire intestines have been squished in the last couple weeks of pregnancy, but that's more of a logistical thing, a space thing, so yeah, what does it look like compared to, I think in the Western culture, we lack some postpartum, I don't know, some postpartum customs that other cultures do much better than we do, right? Around nourishment, around rest, around recovery. So what does that look like for this perspective? Yeah.
Right. So just to kind of like maybe take a little bit of a step back again, is that
that's fine.
During postpartum, or immediately after a woman gives birth, the 2 natural elements that are in excess is air and ether, or space. There's another word for it, because those 2 elements are super, super important for the downward movement of the baby, to help the baby come out the birth canal, and even in forming the baby. So there's so much air and space that gets kind of accumulated in the body, and then immediately after birth, that is what needs to be restored back to balance. And the qualities of air and ether are like, it's cold, it's very mobile, it's rough, it's subtle. So in order to reduce the qualities of something, we need to use the opposite qualities in order to reduce those, right? So the foods that we consume have to be, first of all, mushy and soupy. So I would say, and it's the first few days until the breast milk comes in, it's so important to eat things like rice pudding, or a bone broth khichdi or bone broth congee. So like very mushy kind of food. And I would say that the consistency would be around 16 cups of water to 1 cup of the grain. Because and I mean, I think, once you've had a baby, you will know that you will suffer from constipation in those first few days. And that is the key kind of like indicator that your digestive system is actually almost not even working. And that is why that soupiness, that mushiness is so important, because it's easy for your body to digest that and to assimilate and absorb those nutrients from that kind of consistency, right? And then the other thing is the food has got to be warm, even hot, depending on what the mother is able to. If it's very hot outside, if it's in the middle of summer, then we want to rather go to warm or room temperature stuff. But food has to be warm.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is it's got to be unctuous and oily. Right. So now it's I think a lot of moms tend to stay away from like fats after birth because they think, oh, I want to lose the baby fat, I don't want to gain more. But good fats are so crucial. First of all, to kind of to produce those 4 outcomes that I mentioned right at the beginning, but also it's so vital for hormone production, right? And the consistent promotion of healthy hormones throughout your body. So, and the one fat that Ayurveda, it's almost a superfood in Ayurveda, and it's called ghee. I don't know if I'm sure.
Oh, yes.
And it's basically clarified butter, which makes the protein in milk a lot much easier to digest. And it's got so many benefits. Ghee. It is really a superfood, and I use it in my food every day. And so yes, it's very important to include that fat unctuousness in your meals. So literally, like if you're going to eat rice pudding, very runny kind of rice pudding, add 1 or 2 tablespoons of ghee into that, right? Yeah. And then the other thing that's also important is that we want to kind of have a heaviness to the food, and in the sense, not to say that it's going to be like a heavy meal, like a cheese casserole, like a casserole or a lasagna, not at all, not in the first few weeks. But the heaviness comes from that kind of like the oiliness, the fat, and from sugar. Sugar is actually, or the sweet taste is actually one of the most important tastes or qualities of food that a mom needs to include in her food. And that doesn't mean candy, and it doesn't mean all the bad things, but like grains, they are naturally sweet, and brown sugar, like dark sugar, like molasses, jaggery, and even maple syrup. Those brown dark sugars are iron rich, right? Which promotes the building of blood. So so initially in those first few days until the breast milk comes in, it's really about making a food predominantly sweet, grains, dark sugars, and then a little bit of another thing in Ayurveda is that the food has got 6 kind of like tastes to it, which is sweet. We know about the sweet taste, we know about the salty taste, sour taste. Then there's a pungent taste, which is like garlic and onion and black pepper. It's kind of that, like, it's got that heat to it, right? Then you've got astringent taste, which is foods such as like green bananas, chickpeas. It's got like, if you put that to your tongue, it's got this dry taste to it. And then the last one is bitter, which is mostly predominant in your leafy greens. And in the first few weeks, 2 weeks of postpartum, we want to only favor sweet, salty, and sour.
Okay.
Right. So,
Mm-hmm.
questions.
Yeah. So I don't want to sidetrack us with this, but as you were talking about the like dark sugars, molasses and maple syrup and those sorts of things, I was thinking about how this time also differs a bit for people if they've started, like let's say they are dealing with anemia in the midst of pregnancy, right? Or they had more blood loss than usual with the delivery. Then my assumption, but I want you to tell me if this is true, is that it would be beneficial for someone like that to work with someone like you who can say, because of your specific scenario, this is how you help to replenish your even more significant iron loss, right? Is that true? Or what would that, or are the general principles applied equally no matter what the scenario is in the birth? Does that make sense?
It does differ slightly from person to person, depending also on what type of, body type they are, what kind of environment they live in. But yeah, I mean, somebody has anemia, and like in Ayurveda, the sour taste, which would be like, your lime, lemon, tamarind, sour cream, all those kind of things. We kind of want to not, if you suffer from a lot of blood loss, you don't want to actually eat a lot of the sour taste, because the sour taste prevents blood clotting, and can also lead to excessive lochia or bleeding.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So there's certain things that we can absolutely food, can be used to help, and herbs as well to use to help with certain conditions. That is for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, I mean, for me, I think it's easy to think through all the various scenarios that I've seen that are slightly outside of the normal, you know what I mean? Because there are those scenarios, of course. But I feel like nourishing your body is such a universal principle in that postpartum time. And we generally aren't great at that in Western culture anyway, like even without pregnancy and postpartum. So yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you mentioned a second ago, sorry, I'm going to ask you another question. You mentioned a second ago having this like in the first few weeks. Does this change? So like in the US, for instance, a lot of, maternal like leave time is like 6 to 8 weeks. And that's kind of the time that we think about as the postpartum time. I, of course, think that it's much longer than that forever after you have a baby. But what does it look like in terms of nourishing yourself once you get a little farther out, like 3 or 4 weeks postpartum?
Yeah. And it really all kind of depends on how your digestive system is working, because that will be the key indicator whether it's beginning to work better, whether it's getting to its optimal level. But traditionally it's kind of split up into 4 phases as to which foods to introduce. And in the first few days until the breast milk comes in, it's really about eating porridgey like food. Like I said, that the consistency of 16 cups of grains to 1 cup water, which is going to be cooked for a long time, right? Like a very light dal. And Ayurveda typically is vegetarian, and a really great source of protein is a lentil called mung dal, which is one of the easiest to digest lentil on the planet. So kind of using or cooking a really light dal with using mung beans is also great, because sometimes strangely enough, a mother, she my clients always, when I tell them about the recipes to use in the first 3, 4, 5 days, they're like, ugh. But when they actually give birth and they actually taste this food, they actually realize that what they craved was a lot of sweetness. And in those 5 days until breast milk comes in, you don't want to be eating fruit and vegetables, raw fruit and vegetables, or anything that's heavy, friends tend to come over and bring lasagna over, or mother will crave a hamburger after she's just given birth, and those are all no-nos.
Mm-hmm.
And then once the breast milk has come in, then you can kind of decrease the consistency, so you can then drop down to between 12 to 10 cups of grains to a cup of water, and you can slowly start introduce like vegetables. You can have a lovely sweet potato, cream of sweet potato soup, or like very again, it's just got to be very watery, so that so that your body doesn't really have to take the energy to digest something that's solid, right?
Yeah.
So usually it's about 3 weeks onwards that you can start including a lot more complexity. Like you can start having pasta, but you want it to be a lot more than al dente. It's got to be a little bit softer. And your clue is always about, how's your digestion? Are you gassy? Are you bloated? Are you feeling lethargic, heavy? If that's the case, then you got to kind of just take a step back and say, okay, how complex is the food that I'm eating right now? And kind of just go back to introducing more of that soupy, mushy kind of food. And I think, I wish I had known about this sooner, but in Ayurveda, if you utilize all these principles in the postpartum period, it has the power to completely reset a woman's physiology. Like there's 3, according to classical Ayurveda, there's 3 times in a woman's life: when she first gets a period, when menses starts, after birth, and menopause. But postpartum is a very potent, very, very potent time. And so few women know about this. Like literally, even if you are suffering from a disease such as cancer, you can completely reset it. But it really does require that, even those first 6 weeks, you need to be resting.
Yeah.
Because if you're moving around a lot, and if you're doing a lot of things, you're taking away energy from the recovery process, from your digestive system, starting to work properly again. You're not allowing that to happen.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So
I love that the digestive system can kind of be a guide to you. Like if you're ready to move on to more complex foods, then you see that, which I think is really helpful, because in the postpartum time, I think similar to birth in some ways, we can feel like it's happening to you rather than you having some control over how your body heals.
Yeah. And I was going to say, and especially women who've had a cesarean, that will, all of those symptoms will be more pronounced. The digestive system will take longer to heal, just because it's literally as cutting the woman open, it's that cold air and space that kind of goes inside your organs. So that kind of so it definitely does take longer to heal from that.
Right. Yeah. So I know there's tons more we could discuss about this.
There is.
But I know. In order to keep the episode nice and short, I would love to stop here, but I want my listeners to hear from you how they could work with you, how they can learn more about you. And I think you even have something to share with them. So
Yes. So I offer a 5-week online program where I actually educate moms to be on how to incorporate all of this knowledge and to make it practical in the postpartum period, which includes literally all the meal plans and everything that you need, from the herbs that you need to take to help with lactation and recovery, and also how to kind of gather your tribe, so that, because you do need support in those 6 to 8 weeks. So I also help ladies gather their tribe to get that assistance so that she can recover and rest. And you can find me on amotherspark.com with 2 S's, amotherspark.com, or on Instagram at at A Mother Spark.
Mhm.
And then, yes, I also want to share with your viewers a gift. It's a guide on understanding how you develop perinatal anxiety and stress disorders and how to nip it in the bud.
Oh, what a gift. Yes, that is a
Right?
good resource.
Yeah, because absolutely, you know, we don't know until we get it that it's such a common thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's again one of those things that we kind of were just like, I don't know, it happened to me and I don't have a lot of control, you know. Yeah.
But that's the
Yeah.
thing, we actually can control
Yeah.
it if we know how to right from the
Yeah.
onset.
Right, right. And kind of look at it. I love looking at the postpartum time as a way to support yourself, you know, rather than feeling like you kind of suffer through or survive these weeks, but like actually set yourself up to be well supported so that it feels like a lovely time and not just like a brutal kind of like rude awakening to new parent life, you know, which so often that is what it feels like, but it doesn't have to, you know, so.
Yeah. And then it also gives you that time, those first 6 weeks, to really bond with your baby, to really understand what your baby needs and not be rushing around and like, absolutely, oh my gosh, all of this is happening to me.
Yes, yes, exactly. Well, I will make sure that all of Olga's information is in the show notes so you can go back and reconnect with her. Olga, it has been lovely having you here. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Yes, of course. All right. Well, until the next episode, I wish you well-informed, consent-filled births.
These episodes are edited and produced by Kaylee Harrod, as I'm sure you can probably tell. And our amazing music is credited in the show notes as well. So we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. And in the meantime, have wonderful and consent-filled births.